Have you ever collaborated with Ed Witten?
Collaborated, no, but worked um uh uh right next to him. Yes, in the sense of back in the 1990s. My God, I'm getting old. But back in the 1990s, I was at the Institute for Advanced Study, and we had an idea. I had a particular idea of something I wanted to prove that the fabric of space could rip. And Ed is at the Institute for Advanced Study. Told him about this idea and thought it was exciting. I was working with a couple other people, Paul Aspinall, Dave Morrison, and Edward started to work on his own version. Didn't take anything from us. He was just went a completely different direction, but yet converged on exactly the same question. And it was among the most exciting times that I've had in physics because like we knew he was closing in on it. We were
Uh,
closing in on it. We knew that he's a million times smarter than we are. So we had to work a million times harder and faster to try to get there and not be completely scooped. And basically at the same time, late in the fall, I guess, of 1992, it was, within days, came to the same conclusion from completely different approaches. And so we were right there, head to head. It was an incredibly exciting time. But yeah, he's again, one of those figures whose intellect is just hard to fathom.
I was speaking to Richard Borchards, and he said Ed Witten is terrifying. And I said, why? Well, why? And he said that he puts out as side effects whole other fields like the Witten invariance, like Seidberg.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to tell you, it's funny. A friend of mine was at the Institute for Advanced Study over a summer, and the place had kind of cleared out. And I think Edward was there, and this friend of mine was there. I won't give his name in case he wouldn't want me to share it, but they were kind of sharing a wall. Their offices were right next to each other. And so my friend was slogging away, doing his calculations, hitting dead ends. And all through the summer, he kept hearing tap, 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 tap as Ed was typing out paper after paper after paper, as if he was just sort of sitting there and the ideas were sufficiently formed that he didn't even have to write anything out. He could go right from brain to finished paper. And my friend was like, you sit there and you're like, what am I doing? Why am I in this field? Like, I can't, but that's actually an important thing. There is a place where so many people can contribute. Sort of back to the question you had before. While it's harder for the person who's not gone to graduate school or is working in the basement to really make that contribution, kids who go to undergraduate, then go to graduate, get the PhD. There's so many ways for so many different people with so many different levels of intellectual capacity and level of insight to contribute and to contribute in vital ways. And so you don't have to only be an Edward Witten in order that you advance the field. And so it's absolutely the case.
Yeah, how do you not feel demoralized if you're working on the same problem as Ed Witten or a synonym for Ed Witten? So you work on a different problem or what? Or you try to collaborate?
Look, I mean, so I give you one example where we were working on the same problem in a sense as Edward Witten, and the fact that we got to the finish line at the same time is again, one of those great achievements that I will always remember. For Edward, it was just another day at the office, But having said that, I think it's very important that you pick your problems carefully. You don't want to I don't like to take a problem that every other physicist deems as the most important and they're all working on it. That's never been my approach. My approach has always been, I'm going to find that corner that appeals to me, that corner that I feel like I can, at my own pace, I'll work hard, but at my own pace, I can make headway and make progress and contribute something, bring it out to the world, and then maybe excite people to work on that. I mean, that's, one of the big things I did some years ago is called mirror symmetry, which was developing certain properties of higher dimensional spaces that are relevant for string theory. And when we were working on this, it was a really small community that was working. It was really us and one other group in Texas, Philip Candelas and his group down in Texas. And so it was really exciting. We were competing against each other, but we were in close communication. But it wasn't like 1,000 other groups around the world. We're all battering. It's just us. And so, we got our results. He got his results. Our group got our results. People got excited. And then the field took off. And now, like, mirror symmetry has become a whole field of mathematics that has developed over decades. I no longer even recognize the things that happen in this field because it got so mathematical and so beyond my particular interest, which is really from the physics standpoint. But that's a great place to be. Work in your own corner, come up with something, put it out there, start a field, and then the field takes off. And God bless everybody who works on it.
Your current interest is time, or one of them, the emergence of time?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that it's a big question, though. It's not as though you sit down at your desk and you're like, okay, where does time begin? It's not a question you hit head on. I think it's the kind of question that you hit obliquely. And for instance, I would imagine that this work being done on wormholes and quantum entanglement, taking general relativity and understanding its inherent quantum mechanical aspects, I anticipate that insight into a deep question such as the origin of time will ultimately emerge from that, but not from a head-on approach, but rather from a more indirect approach.
Do you agree with or find interesting Carlo Rovelli's views on time? He has this book, The Order of Time, and Lee Smolin has his own views too, which I believe is a realist, and then Carlo believes it's more relational or an emergent. And then Julian Barber.
Yeah. So I think they're all interesting. Yeah, I think they're all interesting ideas. I think that ultimately the question of the fundamental nature of time is going to require scientific insights beyond those that we currently have. So I'm always interested to hear thoughts on the nature of time. And so Rovelli and the relational quality of space-time, that resonates with me. I think there's definite powerful truth in there. I've seen papers of Lee's talking about the way in which time can emerge from an earlier temporal quality, a kind of way in which the future is built from the present, as opposed to already, in some sense, a temporal dimension being out there. I think it's quite interesting. Julian Barber, I remember being very excited about the initial ideas, and then I read his book, and there was one paragraph where I felt the part of the idea was put forward, and it felt to me that he'd redefined the problem for me in a way that didn't feel as interesting any longer. I don't know if there's been developments since then. So it's all just to say that, yeah, time is a big mystery. Always interested to hear people's take on it. But in the end of the day, I think it's going to take deeper scientific insight. And what's happening now in string theory broadly defined, in understanding the quantum mechanical qualities of general relativity, the intrinsic quantum mechanical qualities of general relativity, I think that's where the new ideas are going to come from.
If you enjoyed this Toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. You should also sign up for Toe Mail, which is again in the description and the pinned comment. You'll receive immediate access to all exclusive updates from the Theories of Everything podcast. It also helps me communicate directly with the core Toe community. You'll also receive my top 10 toes. Think of it as the intellectual version of Quentin Tarantino's Obsession.